most people are going to have that ass kick moment.
Oh, yeah.
Brought about by your own ego.
Yep.
What do you do in that bottom? Do you fortify yourself and say, it's not my fault, it was everybody else? Or do you say, dang, I'm the common denominator. My ego is really invested in this. What am I going to do differently? And that can become that entering moment for genuine authenticity. I'm going to take the mask off, and I'm going to be real, and I'm going to get real, and I'm going to put myself back where I was when I started, that I'm eyeball to eyeball with these people that I'm privileged to lead. I'm not above them.
Hello and welcome. This is Brian Delaney with Unlock Potential, where we get together with top experts in their field who have simple, profound advice to help you and I live better lives, to be able to be more fit to serve the people around us and answer that question, the question that nags within all of us: how good can I be and how great can I make it for people around me? Welcome back to Unlock Potential. I'm your host, Brian Delaney. Today with me, we have the CEO of Giant Leap Consulting, author of a multitude of books. His most recent book, Leadership, 2 Words at a Time, is an incredible book that I'm just getting to open up. I've gotten to benefit from his experience working with Fortune 500 leaders, all of the companies that you can recognize, teaching them how to bring courage into a workplace, how to relate with others authentically, and really defining leadership in this new age. Very excited for you to join in on our conversation as we have it and learn with me as we grow together. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Brian.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And just really excited. Gotten to learn more about you in the last 48 hours. Felt like I had a deadline so that I could get the most out of this conversation and really and bring the most awareness so other people could join in as well. I feel like just over a short period of time listening and learning that you're one of those speakers or communicators where every sentence is a suitcase that we get to unpack.
That's a high bar, Brian.
I'm excited to unpack it with you today because I know I have a lot to learn, and I believe that this conversation can really help people build an entirely different community and even just an entirely different teams, revolutionize their business. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but very excited to unlock your leadership perspective. And I always try to deliver some gold up front so we get people in the door. So when I look at your work and I listen to it, one of the genius zones that I hear from you is this idea of authentic leadership or being an authentic leader. And while I think that is a pretty overused buzzword, it's probably an under-realized goal for most leaders. So when you say authentic leader or somebody who leads with authenticity, define that for us.
I think the important thing is comfort in your own skin.
Yeah.
Knowing who you are.
Yeah.
And being comfortable with who you are. And that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
A lot of us are itchy on the inside or irritable on the inside, lacking self-confidence, and it takes a certain process, I think, and some life experiences to go on. At some point, you have to come to the conclusion, after self-evaluating and assessing and getting feedback, that you are the only person you will spend every living breath with. From the first breath to the last breath, you're the only person you're going to spend all that time with. And so you've got to shake hands with yourself at some point and forgive yourself, learn how to love yourself, learn how to accept yourself while you're still improving yourself for those around you and yourself. And so it's comfort in your own skin. That's authenticity. I'll give you an example, Brian, from my own life. I'm 60 now. It took me until I was 50 years old before I would wear comfortable shoes in front of people at work. I'd be with those hard wingtips.
Yeah.
Right? Because I felt like I needed to be Mr. Professional guy. I could still be professional in comfortable shoes, right? Now, it helped that they had started to put out sneaker shoes at that point in time. But I felt like really self-conscious about that. And I think that at some point you get comfortable with who you are in your own skin. And that is a lot of the idea of authenticity. Having said that, our authentic self is multidimensional. I am truly a nice guy. Don't cut me off in traffic, because that's a different Bill that shows up. When I'm around my teens, I'm mostly a good dad, but my teens can set me off. So we all have the person that we are that has sunshine and shadows, I would say. And we also have the person we're all trying to aspire to be, and that's the better person. That's authenticity too. And sometimes I'm going to show up as the person I'm trying to become on my journey, and that's authentic, but it may not be the authenticity of what I live day in, day out.
Yeah, I think that this is such an important conversation from the jump, because we were talking a little bit before the show, and you were saying how you have some clients who are in a construction background, and one of the first concepts that hit me was this idea of that either as a leader, I was going to show up as a cheap veneer, or I was going to have some integrity, right? And integrity to me meant that what you saw on the outside was what it was like on the inside, right? And I think, as a result of the fact that we're people, my intentions are always ahead of my action. I want to be way better than I am, and I think you're speaking to that very accurately there. But I think it's so powerful for people to hear the first part of what you said. Forgive yourself. Accept the fact that you're the only one who you're going to spend 100% of your time with, and really just start to live that out. Because if we don't, we constantly have to put on the mask and the costume, whether those are wingtip shoes or whatever those are, right. the costume that makes us acceptable to others.
Right. A word that comes to mind as you're talking is congruency. And that to me gets to this idea of integrity. To have values that we espouse and say that this is important to me, but then to live those values, right? And that's not always easy. And when we are not in alignment with our values, what we espouse being different than our actions, we are incongruent. I remember when I moved up to Asheville from living in a different place at the time, part of it was wanting to be more congruent, saying that I wanted to be in an environment that was more environmental, saying that I wanted to be in a town that was very creative, saying that I wanted to be in a place where I could fully express myself, and not feeling like that where I was living. And one of the questions was, well, why aren't I living where I want to be that's more congruent with my value systems? And that idea of congruency was a big reason that I left. It was a big reason I started my own business, because I was existing, becoming somebody that I never set out to be, which is the big schism that a lot of us go through sort of in middle life.
That's right. That's right. And I think that we have this concept, and I would love for you to get into your 3 S's of leadership around this, and then we're going to dive into some of your background, and we've got for those of you who are listening, please stay tuned, because this is going to be cool. You have an incredible perspective that I feel like not many people have access to, so I'm excited to share that. But this whole idea of, when we're younger, we all get asked the same question: what do you want to be? What do you want to be? What do you want to be? And we start off with the answers that we mean, right? I want to be. I love how you use this idea of being fit to serve, because that falls right into it. We all want to be the president, right? We all want to be a police officer. We all want to be Superman. We all want to do these things. And then when we find out that just because we put on the uniform, it doesn't make us a crime fighter, right? Yeah. we descend into this from what do you want to be to what do I have to do? And I think that's where most of us experience that schism in between. Hey, what I have to do is not who I wanted to be. And you're nailing that right on the head with that. But talk a little bit about your framework there for leadership, leading ourselves and leading others. Yeah, so the 3 S's, I call them. The first is self-evaluation. You got to go inside. You have to, so let's talk first about leadership fitness. You got to lead yourself, right? And then you got to lead others.
And you got to lead work because you got to get stuff done. And leading yourself first starts with what I call the 3 S's, and the self-evaluation is the first part. Why do I even want to lead? What makes me think I'm qualified to lead? What are the gaps that I have to make me more qualified to lead? What are the failures that I've experienced that can be put to the grist mill and help me become better? What do I have to offer? What do I have to serve? What are my talents, gifts, and contributions? What are my sunshine and shadows? The sunshine being the gift, the contribution I can make, the passion that I've got inside me that I want to apply. But when I take that gift past a certain point and use it too much or obsess about it, what's the shadow that it starts to cast? So it's not strength and weaknesses, it's strengths and overuse of the strength. What happens then? Wow. And being really careful about that self-evaluation. So that's the first part. Then the second S is self-assessment. Based on how I've evaluated myself, where do I think I can be best applying myself? Where should I be applying my passion? What are the gaps that I do need to close? And what are the things that I will do to close those gaps? And then the third piece being, the term that I originally used to use is self-care. What am I doing to fortify the self? Now I don't think of it. I think self-care has become a bit of a wimpy term. I'm sorry to your listeners because I know it's a very popular term. I think of it more in terms of self-respect.
Oh, so good. So good.
Self-respect. What am I doing what am I putting into my body? What am I putting into my mind? What am I distracting myself with? What am I dwelling on? Where do I fixate on? Where do I apply my time? What am I doing to respect myself? Because if I am going to be the only person I'm going to spend my entire life with, what am I doing to extend this so that I actually have a fulfilling, life? I had somebody one time describe it, an old timer, a good guy, still around, Chip Bell, good guy. And Chip said, Bill, what are you doing when you go on the road? Because you travel a lot like me. You're a bit of a road warrior. He says, where do you sleep at night? Are you staying at the old cheapy Bob's Motel? Or are you putting yourself in a decent place? At the time, I was like, well, yeah, I was trying to save some money. He's like, no, Bill. You stay at the nice Marriott. You stay at because you got to take care of yourself because you're the machinery of your business. If you fall down, you're not going to be able to serve people that you want to. Are you eating right, Bill? Are you eating a salad at least once a week, Bill? Come on, right? And those kind of questions helped me recognize that, it's a matter of self-respect. And when you have self-respect, I think that you can move towards that authenticity. Yeah. Because you are comfortable in your own skin. You've assessed yourself, you have evaluated yourself, and you are being respectful of yourself. Then I think that you are kind of fit to lead, at least leading yourself.
Yeah, and I can remember times where I was like, I told myself I was going to get up at 6:30. I woke up at 7, and then I wondered why my team wouldn't listen to me. Right? It's like, you're not even listening. You don't even think your ideas are good enough to follow. Why would they? And as I've been growing, throughout both my wife and I's companies, one thing that I've come to a realization is that for most leaders, their business doesn't need more from them. It needs more of them. And they're just afraid to give. Because your business never needs more than 100% of you. But it does need 100% of you. And it doesn't need the perfect you, it just needs the real one.
It needs the present you.
Yeah.
Engaged.
That's exactly, not the one who's posturing for acceptance, not the one who's in that. And I think that with that understanding, especially around that self-care, that's where most leaders are putting in effort into into working in their business. They could be putting effort into working on themselves, and then the energy wouldn't be necessarily more passive. It would just be more effective, right? It would be more effective, and they'd be able to see a multiple off of that.
I think a lot of leaders that I work with, and you probably experience it as well, they sometimes they're lucky to have an executive assistant. And that executive assistant books them in this meeting and then immediately to the next meeting and immediately to the next, or they do it to themselves. Yeah. And they allow no pivot time, not even 15 minutes between one meeting and to the next. They go from the 8 o'clock to the 9 o'clock to the 10 o'clock and so on. And they have no time to pivot their head from this meeting to this meeting. They're exhausted. They start having diminishing return on their output and their productivity and the quality of their thinking. Even just allowing 15 minutes in between. I call it a breathable day. Are you allowing yourself to have a day that breathes? Or are you trying to tightly compact it and compress it and put more and more in it, where you are becoming grumpier as the day goes by?
Yeah.
And in my case, I need to be more faithful about it, but I am fairly faithful about it. When I'm off the road, I try to take a nice walk in where I am. And it's a 90-minute walk. It goes all the way up Town Mountain Road and down the other side of the hill. I'm likely to run into a bear, as you know, in
Yes.
where we live and
Indeed.
such. But I call it taking my brain for a walk. I'm not listening to a podcast. I am not improving myself. I am not listening to music. I'm not even going with the intention to think through some issue that I have. Maybe sometimes I'll do that, but most often I'm letting my brain go for a walk, and it's kind of telling me what it wants to think about. And that's important time during my day to rejuvenate, to get fresh ideas, to breathe. I may even start the walk grumpy with like a grump face. I am always in nothing but gratitude when I'm done. I've never had a walk that hasn't ended in gratitude. And I think it's because it's back the self-respect thing again. My brain is like, okay, he respected me today. Let's put him in a better mood.
So many different directions. I could go off of what you're saying. I believe we have time for a 4-hour podcast today. So this is a perfect start to a 4-hour podcast. I love these concepts because at the end of the day, most leaders don't feel seen and then they don't see people. Most leaders don't feel heard and then they don't hear people. And when I say most leaders, I say sometimes me, most of the time me, depending on the situation, right? And I think it's really important, this idea of self-respect. What evidence are you giving yourself that you're somebody who's worth caring for, listening to, regarding? Being honorable to, like when you say something that it means something to you, because if it doesn't mean anything to us first, how can it ever mean anything to anybody else?
Right.
Or if it did, how would we even know? Because we're not familiar with that experience of our words meaning something to somebody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's back to the integrity piece that is so important to leadership, and back to leading yourself. We've said it throughout the ages. How can you be expected to lead anybody else if you can't lead yourself? Somebody once said it to me that how can you lead others if you can't lead yourself out of a paper bag? And it sits true to me.
Yeah.
And by the way, you and I will freely acknowledge that neither one of us gets this right 100% of the time, right? It's a struggle, but it's the pursuit of the struggle, and it's trying to become more consistent. And it's taking 2 steps forward in a day where you take a step back, but you plow through the next day as well. You don't stop, you don't give up, but you don't be a fake.
Yeah,
you don't sell yourself as doing the things 100% perfectly, and come on, everybody else, do it exactly like me. We're human beings, in that back to authenticity, right?
That's right. And this is what separates people who are influential from those who aren't. I believe is people who are influential are. And I was talking with John Maxwell and spoke with him, and I had a couple of questions for him around the business and around a number of things, but listening to how important it is to him to take that time for self-care, to not have to have that pressure of being perfect, and to watch him go throughout his process. Like the most prolific leadership writer of our time, based on quantity of books and number of words printed. Right, I would say that's pretty fair assessment, yet unverified. I'll verify that after. But to watch him go through that process and to listen to him say to me, he said, if you want people to respect you, you're going to tell them about your wins. If you want people to be influenced by you, you will tell them about your struggles.
Oh yeah.
Hey, this is Brian Delaney with Unlock Potential. I've been so thrilled to get to share all of these top tier conversations that have really kind of delivered to you some of the mindsets, some of the tools, some of the things that you need and that they have done in order to get to the next level. We have exclusive content coming on Patreon, and I want to invite you to be a part of that community with us. Not to just learn from us, but to grow with us to the next level so that you can learn how to show up in your life at your maximum capacity so that you can make life great for the people around you and you can be your best self. Talk a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and that journey that has led you to this point in your life.
Yeah. So I grew up in the burbs. I grew up in the suburbs of New York. I grew up in a very affluent community. It's called Larchmont, New York, and it's near New Rochelle and Rye and Greenwich, Connecticut. And we have the Long Island Sound. Literally, we have the Larchmont Yacht Club. There are a lot of Thurston Howell III kind of people there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, indeed.
But I grew up on the other side of the tracks of Larchmont. I grew up more of the working class side, the service class side. It was definitely middle class, but we struggled in my family. But I grew up around all of that wealth and maybe in some respects even envying some of that wealth. And then over time, I've worked with a lot of people who were super wealthy, and I don't envy them so much anymore. There's nothing wrong with being comfortable. Certainly that's a good aspiration to have, right? But that's where I grew up. I grew up in the suburbs of New York, and I wasn't a great athlete. We had our presidential fitness awards and such, and I got the Gimme Award that they give pretty much everybody, the Silver Award.
Yep.
But at the local school one day, or our community pool, I was on the swim team, and I didn't really excel. I found swimming boring. Sorry to the swimmers that might be listening, but I saw these lifeguards, and they were doing can openers and jumps and big, screaming belly whoppers and flips and stuff, and people were watching them, and it looked like fun, and it looked flaring, like it had a creative flair to it. And I was like, that's cool. So me and my friends used to start to go on the diving board and jump around and do flips and twists and stuff. And one day I did a backflip, and my friends couldn't do that. And suddenly I was the cool one.
Oh, it happened.
It happened.
You had your breakout moment.
I'm cool.
Yeah.
I can do a backflip. Yeah. Now they're going to start doing one a week later, but for that week, I'm cool. Mm-hmm. And I got that became my sport in high school, was springboard diving, and I got good at it. And I won the Westchester County diving championships 3 times. And colleges started to dangle scholarships in front of me, and they would all end up saying, "Hey, you're a great low board diver, but tell us about your high board list of dives, because here at college we also have 3 meter. Some of them even had 10 meter. And I didn't have a list of dives on the 3 meter because I am, even today, afraid of heights."
Wait, this is too good. Wait, so yeah, how did you find that? And this is what I mean by perspective. I think it starts from, so you were afraid of heights, but what was the motivator for you to do that, you to overcome that? So
it's like, okay, am I going to sheepishly walk away from another sport? Am I going to continue to be a pipsqueak? Or am I going to work through this fear? And I had a coach who believed in me long enough for me to believe in myself. And I had this same coach. He would take me down to Iona College, where even to this day, I've never seen another diving board that was built on a hydraulic lift.
Oh, wow.
And so now he could take the diving board and move it to 1.5 feet. So I went from 1 meter to 1.5 meters. And I'm doing screaming belly whoppers, and I'm upset with him, and I'm shaking my fist. Why is he doing this to me? It's torture. And I'm getting welts on my back, and I'm throwing my towel in disgust. And after 100 dives, I get a little bit better. And after 200 dives, it's not so bad. After 300 dives, I kind of get bored.
Yeah.
And boredom's a great clue.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think he does when I get bored?
Raises it
Moves it up to 2 meters.
That's right.
Now I'm going over on my dives. I'm doing screaming belly whoppers. I don't want to go to practice. I'm upset with him. 100 dives, gets better, 200 dives. Through this process of modulating between comfort and discomfort, eventually I got a high board list of dives, and a pretty good high board list of dives. And I got a full scholarship to West Virginia University. So we took this New Yorker suburb guy and brought him to West Virginia University, whereas I was their first full scholarship athlete. But it wouldn't have happened had it not been for a coach who nudged me out into discomfort, not comfort, for my own good. And then incrementally, not all at once, but incrementally through a process, helped me deal with intensity of fear at greater levels and greater levels of discomfort. And in that, I found and discovered my courage. And eventually, the kid who started out with a profound fear of heights capitalized on that after college and became a member of the U.S. high diving team.
Wow.
Where I was now diving from 27 meters. So you take the 3-meter board and put it up there, multiple times over, 27 meters. You're looking at about 100 feet into pools that were 10 feet deep, traveling at 50 miles an hour, protected by a Speedo. Yes.
The choice for me would be to where should I wear the Speedo? On my head, probably. I'm gonna throw myself in bubble wrap and toss it.
Yeah. So, but then I decided later on in life, based on, what did I learn from that? So there is that. It's taking the outlandish and saying, okay, is there something I can cull from that experience and that might be useful that I can contribute? Because I don't know how to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wish I had an engineer's mind. I wish I had an architecture mind. I wish I could play music. There's so many things I wish I could do that I don't know how to do. But I know how to take a risk because I stood at the edge of one 1,500 times. And I know what it's like to have to lower the probability of a negative outcome. And I thought that could be redeeming to put into the workplace. And so when I started my business, eventually, after years of actual other experience and graduate school, but the high dive, to capitalize on that, when I started my business, it became a risk leadership company, not mitigating the risk, but what about those times where you have to take a risk? And now it's a courage building company. And in fact, courage building is one of my URLs.
Yeah, I think this whole idea of courage is one that's not given enough press because we all find ourselves in those moments, and we've all benefited from the positive outcomes of summoning that courage and executing on what we know is right. But we all also live with the quiet outcomes of having stepped back from the proverbial edge or the actual edge and not taking that chance, not taking that risk, and then living with that regret that Jim Rohn talks about. That the discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons, right? And so that word has been coming up a lot, but I can't fathom what you're talking about. Like, me sitting on the edge of my seat, getting ready to jump, wanting to have this conversation, right? Cannot fathom what it's like being in that place on the edge of the platform. You're expected to go, right? Because when I'm jumping off a bridge, people are fine if you do it or not. But everyone literally came there to see you do that. So you have this external environmental pressure. You have this idea that this whole thing that you've repeated this a ton of times, but people think for somebody like you that still that one jump that you're getting ready to do doesn't require courage because it's just rote, it's just routine, right? So can you talk about your experience, your many experiences at the top of that board and just some of the internal gymnastics that you encountered and that you learned how to take yourself through so that you could be the type of person who says, I know what I can do, I can take risks?
Yeah, the first thing I would say that comes to mind is you always respected the ladder because on any day that you jumped off that ladder, it could kill you, right? You could die.
Yeah.
The consequences were dang serious, right? Okay. And so you needed to respect that fact. It's the day you were complacent. Honestly, back then, when I was in my 20s, I was immortal. So we were, at night we were like pirates in the town, and oftentimes we would send the most hungover guy up to the top of the ladder, right? And which was not a smart move but we were in our 20s. Yeah. But it was the day that you were complacent that you're probably going to get injured, right? Yeah. So you wanted to be nervous on that ladder because you needed to respect the risk that you were about to take. And that's one of the things that I've learned too, is that when you can't be flippant about a risk. You have to have intensity with the risk, right? The fact that you've got fear going inside of you, it's not inert energy, it's energy. And what will you do with that energy? Will you let it crush you, or will you let it focus you so that you can match the intensity of that moment with your own intensity in sort of a positive way? But you also have to do preparation. We always had somebody at the bottom of the pool agitating the surface of the water.
Yep.
Because from up there, you can't differentiate between the glassy surface and the concrete bottom. So you need to have it agitated. So you would need two people to do that.
That's wild. We could probably hang out in any segment of this and just spend an hour. But so just somebody is down there letting you know where the target is. So
you've got that agitated water.
Yeah.
You had somebody during the day, even if it wasn't you, tightening down the guy wires. Mm-hmm. Because when you're up there, on windy days, that ladder is shaking. We were putting up a ladder one time. I was standing at the top, one hand on the ladder, and somebody was getting the middle guy wire. And the guy wire we had 3 of them on each side and 3 in the back. So there were 9 wires that would hold that ladder down in place. And it was sturdy. But every now and then you had to tighten them and such. Yeah. And one guy was tightening the ladder, and a guy wire broke. So suddenly I went, ding.
Oh, no.
and if I wasn't holding that ladder, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. So you had the equipment maintenance. You stretched every day before you went up and did any dives. You did preparation dives. Mm-hmm. You oftentimes did some jumps from 50 feet, or maybe a few intermediate dives to get you ready, because you needed that level of honoring the work to be able to deserve the right to do the high dive in a successful way and to not get hurt. And in fact, Brian, after having done 1,500 of them, I knew I was pressing my luck. There needed to be a point in time where, as much as I loved it and as much as I loved the people that I was with, that you can't do that successfully. It is like, milk in a fridge. It's got an expiration date, except you just don't know when it is. So, but I figured 7 years was enough Peter Panning.
Yeah. So when it comes to that, and I think this is the thing that I resist the most personally, is that nervousness is part of the preparation, and it actually gets you into, as long as you use it well, a state that allows you to actually do this thing safely.
Yeah.
Whereas it feels like everything could go wrong, that actually puts us into the state when it's directed, when it's intentionally directed, so that things do go right.
Yeah.
And I've resisted nerves as part of my process for a long time. It's like this ancillary thing. It's like, I have nerves, but I'm okay. I still perform. Mm. But it was this other version when it comes to a difficult conversation that you have to have with somebody, or where you have to say something that is not going to be accepted, but is necessary in that situation, or just doing the right thing for my family, or having to come up with money out of thin air, or having to as a father, as a brother, in all of my different roles in life, as a husband, where I've been faced with some very difficult situations. Like, I got nervous, but instead of I hear you reaching for a perspective that says I got nervous and that helped me set up for this next place, and I think that's really interesting.
I want to give credit to a person who helped me on that, a guy named Dr. Michael Apter, and he came up with a theory of motivation called reversal theory. But specifically about, so I'll tell you a little bit of this story. I was writing my first book, Right Risk, it was called. And there wasn't a lot to go on. I mean, I had my own experience, right? But I started researching. In fact, I had a researcher assistant at Emory University who would, we would work together, and she would grab literature and I would read it, and then I'd meet with her on the weekends and we would process it together. And then I came across this one guy's work, Dr. Michael Apter. He had written a book called The Dangerous Edge. He ended up changing the book a few years later, different title. But I got in touch with Dr. Apter, and I was like, this is the Rosetta Stone. I think I probably should stop writing my book because you've already said what I really want to say. The book didn't sell so well, so I thought, well, maybe I can still say it and popularize it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I invited myself up to come and spend time with him, and he agreed. And I went up to Washington, D.C. He was a British guy, but he taught at Georgetown and some other universities. And we talked about fear and about its energy. And he said, in his British chap kind of way, he said, Bill, most people think of the Yerkes-Dodson model, where you sort of go up on the performance curve when you go up on the energy curve, right? So we get a certain degree of energy or motivation, if you will, that comes up, and it inspires us to do something and we perform. But past a certain level, we get saturated with that intensity and our performance goes down. He says, that's how most people think of it. He says, but I think of it differently. He calls it a protective frame.
Okay.
And that is like your inner constitution, your degree of preparation, your mental fortitude, your degree of confidence. He says, imagine at a baseball game and it's the 9th inning and your team is facing the opponents and your pitcher is throwing the pitches and it's a 3-2, count right now. You want, and yet the opposing side is screaming because they want you to hit the home run off of this pitcher. You want your pitcher to meet the intensity of that moment, right? Do you really want to subdue the intensity of that moment with that pitcher? Or do you want him to live into that intensity?
That's right.
And so he calls that a protective frame. And instead of thinking to yourself, I'm so afraid, I need to reduce my fear, he said, why not focus on, I need to increase my confidence.
That's right.
What is the action I could take to make me more confident in this moment, as opposed to reduce my fear in this moment? That kind of helped me think about carrying your intensity with you.
I think this is another differentiating factor for how you write and how you communicate and consult is this idea of you get action. You get courage from action. This idea of we need to move now, rather than trying to summon that courage in order to do the action. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you see that in that framework of nerves?
Sure, and there's proportionality and degrees of everything, right?
Of course,
perspective, right? Because there's sometimes you could act, dunderheadedly and jump off a cliff.
Yeah, there's nuance involved in this conversation as a disclaimer to everyone who's listening.
Sure thing, right? And you've heard there's an old phrase. I mean, some people will say "fake it till you make it," but I think a better way to put it is act as if, right? Act as if you are doing the thing that you wanted to do, or act as if you've already gotten the thing you're trying to get to. And in that action can come the development of something. It's like another phrase that I like is when you take leaps of faith, unseen hands are there to catch you, or build yourself the net along the way. So you don't, because you can get analysis paralysis. You can get caught, particularly with a risk, on the threshold of the risk before you've crossed over the threshold. There's this intensity. It could be, as you say, it could be the confrontation you need to have with somebody, right? The actual confrontation of going over that step may only be a 45-second thing that you're saying to the person. But the weeks that go on in your head about, should I do it? How am I going to do it? What if they get upset? And so we hesitate, right? It's all that planning. But if you just did the 45 seconds, you have to be thoughtful, and hopefully you don't have to clean up a mess, and there might be some degree of probability of that person being upset. But it's the avoidance that often gets in the way, whatever the risk could be.
It's so true, because I look at those moments in my career and I see the faster I acted on it, the better they went, just in general. Of course, approach it with care, right? And I think this is a differentiator. I want to be careful, right? Full of care, not paranoid about injury, right? Those two things I think are very, very different approaches on that. And I see where I've been paranoid about injury, whether it was to myself or to somebody else, and then the wall of self-preservation goes up, all the crap starts to happen, and instead it's like just settling with the fact that it doesn't take unlimited amounts of time to learn things. It doesn't take unlimited amounts of time to prepare for things. So what is a reasonable time for me to learn and to prepare for this thing, given that it's going to take me 45 seconds?
Yeah.
Right?
Right, yeah.
And I think that for me has helped in those scenarios, but the experience was very much me with my toes over the edge of the board, leaning backwards, saying, just dive, just dive. So, I think the framework for how you were able to lean forward in those moments, and even despite, because after 1,500 times, it does get kind of typical but the thought pattern is still there.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation recently with a friend of mine. I won't divulge who it is because I didn't tell him how impactful the story was, and I didn't get his permission to share it. Okay. But this person is a world-renowned mountain climber, and he's certainly known in that community. Yep. And he was saying, and I said something about, chalk it up to, or you make sure you get somebody with a lot of experience. And he's like, I don't know if I even believe in experience anymore. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, I could hire a contractor in my house and they could say, oh, I've got 25 years of experience, and they still didn't do the thing that I wanted them to do or did a crappy job. And where he was getting to was a true professional never takes that experience for granted. That they approach every piece of work like it is their first piece of work. It goes to this Buddhist notion of the beginner's mind, to always approach so if you've done 1,500 times, it's hard to do, right? Like 1,499, it's hard to bring the beginner's mind. Yeah. But to the extent that you can, and approach it as with the respect of the latter, that this could be the day that it gets me, that I am honoring the work as a beginner every time. And how I do this in my own life is that I did a crappy talk one time here in Asheville. I almost thought I would stop talking on the speakers.
You've had one of those too.
Oh my gosh.
How many? 2 hands? I know I could count mine on 2 hands and have about 10 more people and have them raise hands and feet. Yeah.
And this was the one where I was like, it made me think, maybe I should not do this, right? Mm-hmm. And I realized that there was a lot of things that I hadn't done for that particular talk that I had done for other talks in terms of preparation. Okay. And it taught me a lesson. Like I touched the hot plate and I was like, all right, I'm not touching that hot plate again. And I decided I was going to be all in, that I'm going to do this. And now, even though I've done literally thousands of talks, every time I'm going to be doing a talk, either the night before or the morning of, I have index cards and I'm writing down not full sentences, they're codes to myself so that I'm in the flow. I know the flow.
Yep.
I've done the deck, I've done the talk, but it's a part of honoring the work. It's a part of keeping the beginner's mind. It's part of staying fresh. It's part of not getting lulled into thinking, I'm experienced, I'm above this now.
Whenever it comes to this, because I've been struck with it so many times, it's so important to, instead of focusing on moving from basics to advanced, to become more advanced at the basics. Because the basics will always you'll always meet the basics again. And the next time, for me, I'll have too big of an ego to see them very clearly, right? Because they're going to be like, yeah, I've done that, right? Because I won't have those beginner's lenses on there. I'll still be in teacher mode instead of student mode, right? And being able to return to that, especially after years of experience, affirmation, celebration, all of those things. Yeah, what is that process for you to stay in that beginner's mind, yet walk up with the courage of having done this multiple times before?
Yeah, well, so I just want to reinforce what you said. Like in diving, we have the front dive, the back dive, the inward dive, the reverse dive, and the half twist. Those are what's called the 5 requireds. Okay. It's like our fundamentals, right? But off of each one of those are multiples thereof. So the front dive becomes a front somersault, becomes a front 1.5, bemes a front 2.5, becomes a front 3.5. From the twisting dive becomes a half twist, becomes a full twist, a double half twist, all sorts, right? But it's those requireds, you need to keep in tune with your requireds. It's the same thing from humanity. Like, I love really one of the best books written of all time in the self-help area, and in the business section too, is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because it's timeless principles. It's the same thing as the requireds, right? It's like these principles exist whether you live them or not. If you violate the principle, it is going to have a natural reverberation, whether you're conscious of it or not. The principles are. So you ought to learn about the principles and you ought to practice the principles. And when you get off the principles, figure a way to get back to the principles. So the beginner's mind thing, back to the essentials that matter most. For me, the honoring the work by writing down down my flow order. But also, every talk that I do, I don't think that I've ever done a talk in the last 10 years where I reused the same deck. Okay. There's something novel I've put in there to keep me, because I need to be inspired too. I need to keep the inspiration, the will, the want, the curiosity, so that I'm fascinated by the material that I'm going to be bringing to people.
Yeah. For you in that space, when you look at leaders of organizations, because you've had the opportunity to work with so many leaders in various types of organizations, various types of industries, and various amounts of success. When it comes to the leader being able to have a big enough ego to be able to speak with conviction, right? However you want to frame that, I think there's a level of confidence that people get based on evidence of past performance and based on other people's acceptance of what they've done, where they can speak with conviction that brings their people confidence, but still allows them to check that ego so they can still fit inside of a typical business building without increasing the door size, right? And I see that as I know that's my personal battle for me, is to be able to have enough ego to really believe in what I'm saying and to be able to say things with that level of conviction that lends confidence, but still be able to question, how sure are you of what you think right now? Is now the time to doubt your doubts? Is now the time for you to look more into that? So I would love to hear your experience watching leaders manage that and what you think the importance of that dance is.
Yeah, I have some of the most riveting speakers I've ever seen. Actually, that mountaineer that I talked about is really one of them. It's not that they're perfectly polished. It's that they're perfectly honest. And their honesty comes through. And then when they're telling you the things that they've done, it's the credibility is evident. They don't need to say, look, I'm credible because here's my diploma that says credibility on it, right? It's like they're sharing their experiences and you're like, wow, that and how that unfolded. And often, and I agree with what you said before, they're not the hero of their own story, right? They're letting you know where they got it wrong and what the lesson that they drew from that, and that you can then pass to others as kind of a warning, but there's also the gold in the lesson, right?
Yep.
And so I think, and it goes back to the original concept we talked about, authenticity. Like the most powerful thing, I would give 2 word of advice for 2 words. That's my thing, right?
Two words.
Always back to the 2
right.
words. But the 2 word of advice that I would always give anybody who's starting out on their journey to wanting to be in front of groups and share content and information is be yourself, right? I'd much rather have somebody awkwardly maybe make a mistake with a few words, maybe make a joke that doesn't land, than somebody who, but is themselves and is comfortable in their skin and knows who they are, than somebody who's tap dancing for me in this perfect way, but is full of shallow, fakey, but perfectly fake.
Yeah. It's that polished turd model, right? It's just like, for all of us sense it and we all resent it, yet it's so easy to become it. For me, when I was getting into a new business, getting out of construction, where I had my credibility diplomas, and I had, evidence of my own competency, I was getting into a different field. One of the things that I realized about myself, I said, if it's this easy for that many people to lie in this industry about their money, it's going to be just as easy for me too. And so I have to set things up so I don't do that, because I know that when I'm dishonest about where I am, I can't ever be honest about where I am after that. And that's a curse. And I don't need to put that curse on myself. And so what you're saying is so important. But I think some leaders may have gone a little far down that road, right? They've already said the lie that's become the persona, and now they have their withering personality, dying underneath this carcass, this thing that's made up, that's not real.
Yeah.
How can if I was a leader who did go down that road, how can I get back?
Well, yeah, wow, that's a great question. So kind of moving into the leadership piece there. This leadership is really seductive. When you've got people reporting to you, it starts out with a great deal of innocence and aspiration, and you want to make your difference in the world, and you want to do right by others, right? And that's the impulse for a lot of people. In fact, a lot of groups that I'll speak with, one of the starting in the first workshop of a 12 workshop series, I'll say, when you envision yourself when you're done with your career, what do you hope to have happened? And almost everybody will say that they've left a legacy of impacting people in a positive way, right? Yeah. And we get in there early and start to do that. And then we start to, maybe we get a little overbooked, and so we show up to a meeting late. Mm-hmm. And at first we apologize. And later we don't even apologize because nobody's asking for our apology. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we interrupt somebody a first time and, hey, they didn't call us on it, so now I can interrupt them again. Or maybe I start to care that I get the parking space that's a little closer. And now I start saying, well, I've been here long enough and now I'm in a senior VP, so why isn't my office a little bit bigger?
I just want to be clear, whoever gave him these notes on me, we're not friends anymore. I love that these things are so common where I'm just sitting there like, ow, oh, I should have worn a vest for this one.
Please, don't feel targeted, because I've worked with thousands of leaders. I see it all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that I've done, some of these things too. It's natural. It's natural because leadership is seductive, because people, when you're in a leadership, not everybody will step up to a leadership role.
That's right.
And so we start to think of, well, that person who did that when most people won't is a little bit special. So let's start treating them special. I'll let them interrupt me. They can come late to the meeting. They don't have to offer the same excuse. And yeah, they can have a little extra helping of dessert. And so we treat them special. And then when you as the leader start to become, you start to like that attention. Yeah. You start to like the special treatment. You start to give the people who give you the special treatment more things. Then now you've switched the equation, where leadership is supposed to be about the people and the organization you're privileged to lead. Now leadership has become about what are you getting, not what are you giving. Mm-hmm. And that's a dangerous place for leadership. And your original question was, so how do you get that person back, right?
Yeah.
Back to natural laws and principles, right? There will be a reverberation naturally. Mm-hmm. If you don't bring yourself back, the world will bring you back.
Yeah.
I like how Clint Hurdle, a former coach of the Pittsburgh Pirates, he wrote the foreword to one of my books, which is called A Leadership Kick in the Ass. That's the title
great.
of the book.
I love that.
And the book is about those ass kick moments
that
you deserved because you brought it on yourself through the special treatment that you enamored yourself with and you eventually got. But what he says in the foreword of the book, and I love it, he says what he's learned over time is that there's two kinds of leaders: those who have been humbled and those who are about to be. Right.
I love that.
Like most people are going to have that ass kick moment.
Oh yeah.
Brought about by your own ego.
Yep.
And it happened to me, right? I've had that bottom. And then what do you do in that bottom? Do you fortify yourself and say, it's not my fault, it was everybody else?
That's right.
I was the one who was right in this situation. Mm-hmm. Or do you say, dang, I'm the common denominator. What do I need to, my ego is really invested in this and I just got humbled. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do differently? And that becomes that can become that entering moment for genuine authenticity. I'm going to take the mask off and I'm going to be real and I'm going to get real and I'm going to put myself back where I was when I started, that I'm eyeball to eyeball with these people that I'm privileged to lead. I'm not above them.
So good. So good. And you're, a lot of the principles that you're talking about, I can look through, and I've heard in so many books before, but I love this. I love this principle because it's whether we're employees or whether we're direct reports or we're the ones being reported to, right? It's so easy for us to end up in a collusive relationship where we work together with people for our mutual destruction. And I think that's it. Whether you're hearing this from Bill and you're saying, "Oh well, yeah, I wish my leader would do better," as soon as I'm hearing you, I'm like, I need to make sure I'm not stepping in any of those collusive relationships with people who are leaders in my life, and that I'm able to speak humbly and gently, but still bring challenge that's necessary in that environment. And as a leader, I think us just saying that's on me, those 3 words can be a big deal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I own it. My bad.
Yep.
And then sometimes even asking for the forgiveness. Hey, I hope you can forgive me. I shouldn't have done it that way, and I apologize. Ooh, I apologize. Talk about courage.
Would you be willing to give me another opportunity? I've watched some of the best leaders. I swear I've seen some of the best leaders come out of whether it's a conference or they're all fired up. Seen some of the best leaders, they get on the phone with their team members. You guys won't believe what I just heard. I'm so fired up about this. We're going to change the world. Here's what you have to do. Yeah. We're going to change the world. Here's what you have to do. And what I've seen on the other side of that is, and I can think of a few examples, people coming out of those same environments, calling their team and saying, hey guys, I'm sorry. I've been blowing it. I just heard what leadership is about and I've been blowing it. Here's what you can expect from me. Are you guys willing to give me another opportunity to earn the right to be the leader of this team?
Yeah. Powerful, right?
It's high dive powerful. I'm not sure, but it's one of the...
It is.
Yeah.
And I think that, those two, we need both. We need a leader who's confident and comfortable in their own skin. And we need a leader who hasn't lost sight of their roots and remembers where they came from. Yep. And is humble enough to say, I made a mistake, or I need help, or can you give me a second chance, right? And then humble enough to give a second chance to somebody else who's messed up. So we need both. We need to have this. I don't think they're exclusive to one another. I think they're sort of both important. We need genuine confidence, not false overconfidence. Yeah. And we need genuine humility. And both of those takes courage in their own way. The courage of humility is a courage of vulnerability. It's a courage of disarmament. It's a courage of exposure. Because is somebody going to use this against me? Yep. Is this going to be seen as weakness? And I don't want to lose the power that I have to not be weak. I want to be seen as strong. So, so therein lies the courage, right? This.
Especially in this environment where people are getting canceled. And it may not even be about retention of position. It may just be about retention of, I've got to support my family. And so authenticity and being an advancement, those two might be tracks that are heading in very different directions inside of the organization. And for me, I've got to reconcile. It's like, okay, I can adapt in this moment and become the person who I'm not going to be happy with down that road, because if I lie right now, it's going to set up a pattern of lying for me, and I'm really good at patterns. So I can't set that. I can't do that. But in this situation, make my boss look better to lie, or it may help me get the sale a little bit easier to lie. Right. Or it's all of those things. And what they are is they're communication shortcuts, they're relational shortcuts that end up costing us so much more on the back end. Hey, this is Brian Delaney with Unlock Potential. We've recently released our new Patreon that provides exclusive content to our members in order to help you get to the next level in your life. Let's grow. This idea of the humility to grab on to changing the way that we coach and being able to present ideas in a simple form that it runs really against my ego. I want to use the big words. I want it, because I want you to know how smart I am because I use the word collusion. Right? And I know what that means, kind of maybe some days, if I've had a cup of coffee at the right times. But that's almost, that runs in direct opposition to this idea of, like, as a leader, my job is to make complicated things simple and accessible for people who can act on them. Yeah. Right? So, how do you see... in your book, Leadership 2 Words at a Time, I wanted to get to this question because it's like, sum down the whole thing that I have to say to somebody in 2 words. This guy knows this guy knows what I need. So.
Yeah. Well, when I wrote my first book, and I realized when I got to my second book that I had Here's what actually it was my third book. My then 5-year-old son came home from school. He had gotten to be the class leader for the day. And so when he came home from school, my wife said, make a big deal of it. I'm like, well, yes, my son gets to be the class leader. So I'm like, hey, high five. Ian, what'd you get to do as class leader? And he said, I got to open doors for people. Ooh. And I was like, wow, you're absolutely right. That's really what leaders should be doing, right? And I started thinking about, man, that's what leaders did for me. They opened doors of opportunity. They saw me when I felt invisible, right? They gave me a shot. So I decided to write a book called Leaders Open Doors. And I decided that I really needed to have the spirit of the innocence of that comment to be the anchor for the book. And what that took me to is it made me realize my first 2 books, especially my first one, I was trying to prove to the reader how smart I am.
That's so good.
I was using big words. I was quoting research and statistics. I was putting quadrant models in place.
So many footnotes.
Yes, but I was trusting that they would understand my brilliance. And but this book, I decided I needed to not. It wasn't about me. The book. The book was about bringing ideas that could be helpful to people.
Yeah.
And I've tried to capture that spirit in this book and follow that train of thought. And where it took me was that in my coaching practice, I coach a lot of people. I coach some people today. I'm coaching some people tomorrow. It's not exclusively what I do, but I do a lot of executive coaching. In a given month, at least 20 one-on-one coaching sessions, right? And what I have found over time is that a lot of times a person will come all twined up about something. It's like, you ever take off a leather off a baseball?
Oh, yeah.
You see all the twiny stuff in there.
Yep.
People are like that. And they come to a coaching session twined up. And working with them and asking questions, if I can help them narrow it and name it, the thing that is perplexing them, or the solution to that, in the fewest amount of words, the least amount of words that they will use, the much more likely they are to actually do the thing to remedy. If they're going on and all sorts of dimensionalizing the thing, and they will initially, but if that's where they end up, still muddied up, they're not going to take action, right? But if I can narrow it, so I'll give you an example. I had a guy, good guy, his name was Steve. He wanted to get to the next level in his organization, which was partner. And the partners were like, he wants it too much. He's really intense. We don't know if we want him up here. Can you work with the guy? I had already been working with him, but we continued the coaching. And I said to him, Steve, what do you think that they need to see before you're going to be in a place where they want you up there? And he was quiet for a minute, and he said, I don't know. I guess they want me to be calm and confident. And I was like, bing! It was like, that's exactly what they want.
That's so good.
So now that we know calm confidence is the thing you're going to work on, now let's put together some actions, right? And then he'd get ready to go to a meeting, and this is back in the BlackBerry days, and he's like, I'm going to go to the meeting today. Remember my CC, that was our abbreviation for calm confidence, that he would bring into the meeting. And over time, I've seen that happen, right? And hence the book is Leadership 2 Words at a Time, because I'm giving the new leader. It's a lot you can think about with leadership. It can be so overwhelming. It can subsume you. It can make you feel small and confused. And if you can just take the 2 words that are right in front of you now, and I give a lot of 2-word concepts, and just focus on that next right thing, take action on that, then your leadership journey will be bearable, and you'll probably enjoy leading, and you'll probably be more successful than if you take the giant burden, of leadership on. So I don't know, I said a whole bunch there, but I don't know if it was about the simplicity piece.
No, well, and I think that's exactly it, is that as a leader, one of the questions that I have to ask is it simple enough, right? And what's the minimum effective dose here? And I think you've really nailed it when it comes to communicating with people, because it's like, what do they say? A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And we show pictures to people. Imagine, what is a PowerPoint slide worth then? Too many, right? Too many words. And so I think that's where it gets down to us as a leader doing the preparation, walking in to say, hey, there's a simple message. I have to have the courage to give it.
Right.
And as someone who has those conversations with people and have been on the receiving side of those conversations from coaches who genuinely cared about me, it was the ones who leaned right into the conversation, and we were able to. They had the courage to lean into that conversation and to keep it simple by not tap dancing around it and saying, "This is a problem. This is a problem."
Right.
If you would sort those out, we're good.
Yeah.
Rather than making it about a bunch of other things.
Right. I had. I think it was. This is going to be smarty pants talk. But Henry David Thoreau said that if everything is urgent, all things are trivialized. Meaning, if you've got, I remember working one time with, the company was Bell South. It no longer exists. It was a baby Bell. And the company that I worked at, which was a big, giant consulting company, still around, and I enjoyed it. It's a famous company. But when I was there, we were working for Bell South. They were our client. And they had their corporate priority list. And it was like, well, you better pay attention to that. That's on Bell South's corporate priority list. And you'd run into something else. Well, you are paying attention to this, right? Because this is on their corporate priority. And then one day I remember saying, well, all right, how many things are on this corporate priority list of Bell South? And somebody said, I think it was about 150. If you got 150 priorities, you don't have any priorities.
That's right.
Right? And sometimes you'll be working with a coach, and they're like, you need to do this. And the more stuff they layer on, or a lot of times leaders will do that for their direct reports. They give them 100 things to work. But to your point, if you can sort of simplify, pull it back, telescope out, let's just work at the big stuff first, right? Big picture, what are the central concepts that you need them to be focusing on? I'm getting ready to do a workshop with a client in New York. Good client, and I get a lot. I learn from every leadership group that I work with, right? They fortify me. But I asked them, I said, this session is going to be on goal setting. Send me your goals so that we can present some of those to this group in the session. They sent me an email. It must have had like 8 pages of goals. I'm like, okay, we need to bubble this up because this is really... this is really overwhelming. The motive and intention was they're worried about the business. They want to make sure that the business is doing a big volume of stuff, and they've got so many areas that they want to improve, and that's good. They've got an appetite for improving things as leaders should have.
That's great.
But if it's going to be 150 things on your list, then what is the priority of your goals? Because you really kind of don't have goals at that point.
Yep.
So that's where we are. They bubbled it up to 5 things.
5, which is those are goals worth having. And I think it is. I think when it comes right down to it, for me, being able to just be okay with saying what needs to be said, and doing what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Like that's a consistent theme that I hear repeated in your message is like, yeah, I was afraid and I did what I needed. I still went up the ladder. I was in that space. I was afraid to have that conversation, or when the leaders know the conversation that needs to be had. Whole departments can be formed around conversations that are not had in near misses. And that's, and when it comes to your work, how do you like, what are some of the frameworks for courage that you give to those leaders, especially leaders who have been, are in that position where they're no longer fighting for what they want. Now they're fighting to protect what they have.
That's a great way to put it, right?
Yeah.
I can think, what comes to mind immediately is a conversation that I had this morning. There is a person who's sort of a prototypical leader in the construction space. So there's a lot of, short-fused, hard-ass kind of leaders, right?
Yeah.
And that's how they came up. And this guy traditionally has been that too. And he's working on himself. And he's recognizing the need for not flying off the handle, the need to have more composure, and the need to bite his tongue more, the need to be a little bit more, he used the word political, and so he has done that. Now he finds himself extremely frustrated because he also has 2 bosses that he reports to. And both of them are dominant people whom he sometimes used to clash with, but out of that clash they could produce, some good things. But he's trying to be more professional, elevating who he is and such, which is a good thing, right? He's trying to make changes in who he is as a leader. But our conversation today was about proportionality. that it's good that he's experiencing the discomfort. He's experiencing discomfort with these new behaviors because you should. If you're trying something new, it should be uncomfortable because you don't grow in your comfort zone. You grow in your discomfort zone. So he's there in his discomfort zone, and we acknowledge that. And then we talked about proportionality. There's a little bit of the baby out with the bathwater sort of situation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And we talked about in what ways does the occasional clash add value, for one, but we also talked about how could he assert without it turning into a fight. So now he has tried the new behavior of biting his tongue, but you can't always bite your tongue. You need to still be engaged in the conversation. But how can you do it in a way where you don't regret what you said later, which often happens with a hothead, or it's not coming from a place of anger, but it's coming from a constructive place of how you want it to be. And that was where our coaching conversation, left today, is that he's going to actually have the conversation with those two bosses around an alignment issue between the two of them, but he's going to be talking about the condition he wants versus what he feels is misaligned. So how do you find your own courage? I would say is one thing to ask yourself is, or to recognize, it's often where you are not. It's, you're here in this space, but you're needing to be over here. Ask yourself, where am I playing it too safe? That's one thing. That points in the direction of the next courageous move. And for that person, maybe safety is contention. That's where I'm comfortable, right? And what would playing it less safe would be biting my tongue, right? Or learning how to discern, or learning how to speak with intensity but not anger, So it's playing it, where
that's part two. We're going to claim that. And how to communicate with intensity but not anger. This is great.
So courage is and then of course with courage you always want to break it down. There's the risk of action, and what is the consequence, the what if, the negative catastrophization, big word. But also, what is the risk of not taking the risk? Because that too is a risk. And oftentimes it's a more dangerous risk. It's like somebody just put a gas valve and they opened it in the room and nobody was looking. It's like slowly over time, this other risk, the risk of inaction, can be more dangerous, but it's over an extended period of time. It's the risk of complacency. It's the risk of decay. It's the risk of entropy. It's
Yeah, and I think that a gentleman I know, I'm not sure if he read this somewhere, but he brought this to me and he said, big difference between scary and dangerous, isn't there? He said, and I like the fact that you were, your point of it's probably where you're not, and this idea of the sunshine and the shadows, right? Where it's like, okay, welcome to one of your strengths that you've overused, so you no longer have to be present there, right? And just reminding ourselves, it's like, oh yeah, I might be so strong that I have a blind spot there. I might have X-ray vision and I'm missing the thing that's right in front of my face.
Yeah, and for hard-nosed, tough kind of people that come out of construction, it's like the old book Marshall Goldsmith wrote. What got them here won't get them there.
Yeah.
I had a guy I was recently working with. He said that he was fine being that tough, hard-ass guy with a team. And he could make everybody scared on that team. They would do what he was going to say. But then they gave him a program where he had multiple teams, and he was no longer winning. That was the thing. Either I'm winning or I'm losing. He started losing in terms of productivity and schedule slippage and profitability and margin going down. And he realized, okay, whatever I did there, it's not working. I need something new. And in his case, he needed to, honestly, it surprised him. He's like, somebody told him, I can't say the guy's name. You always start off, you right into the work, and you're always about the production. You're always telling us what we're doing wrong. You're always pointing out the flaw. Why don't you come in and just ask us how our families are? In the morning, right? And he started with a little bit of small talk, and he's like, I really discounted. I thought it was so stupid, but then I did it, and I was like, oh my God, it actually made a difference, and I actually enjoyed learning about their lives. He's afraid that if I care too much, then I'm going to, become weak in the process. But by doing that small investment in the human being that's working with you and sometimes for you, then that person knows they are not a machine part, that they are not, you're not invisible. You see them. Now they're willing to, so later when you have to direct them, you've made the investment in caring. They understand that you actually have their back and you support them and you're interested in them. And now when you have to be directive and assert, They're much more willing to do the thing that you're asking them to do without stewing with resentment, thinking that you're just a jerk.
Yeah, or doing it with a half-assed effort, right? Because they're doing exactly what you said.
Right.
I put a dot here and the period here and cross that T and we're done.
I did what you said.
Nothing in between the lines. Nothing, no inference, no assumption, none of those things.
No extra.
No extra because the heart's not there.
Right.
Right. That is. And we've got some great. I'm going to ask you a question on the Patreon side, but I want to finish up with this because I think it's really relevant to our time and to what you're thinking, what your thoughts are around that communication and around understanding how to communicate from different people to different people. One of the disconnects that I see in leadership is that level of communication, not only what I want to say, but what I want you to hear. I think that's a big thing because if a leader goes back and says, well, I said you're not going to see a lot of people behind them. When they say, this is what I wanted you to hear, this is what I was attempting to communicate, and they're getting clarity on that, I think it's a big deal. We have all the technology in the world, and the people problem still hasn't been solved, right?
Right.
And right now, as I think there are individuals in a lot of different roles, like struggling to grasp. I know I'm one of those people struggling to grasp with how do I gain perspective using ancient wisdom with modern application, and then how do I use the current tools. And I heard you talking about a practice. It was actually a book that I absolutely love in order to gain perspective. But I would also like to ask you for that perspective on how modern leaders can use modern tools.
Sure. Yeah. You had mentioned John Maxwell before. Another person and I think that they're friends actually, and they both lived in San Diego. Somebody I had the good fortune of having dinner with last week with a few people, but I've known him over time, and he helped me launch this book. His name is Ken Blanchard, and he wrote a book called The 1 Minute Manager and some 75 other books, and he's in this field of practice of leadership. He's another giant. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely,
and a good human being. And runs a sizable organization himself. Yeah. And he asked, I'll tell you a couple of things that I picked up from him. The first goes to this idea of getting centered. I saw a video on YouTube of him speaking to like the London School of Business or something. And he said, how do you start your day? It's a great question. He's like, do you start, does the alarm clock go off? Like, or even the name. Yeah. We start in alarm. Right? We're like alarmed for our day. And he suggests, or he says, a lot of people do that. And that's true. Like you start by maybe having an argument with your teen kids and you wolf down a burrito and you're chugging your coffee and then you listen to a shock jock on the way to work. And then you get into work and you're shooting it down like a game of Space Invaders with all the interruptions that are getting it. And how do you start your day? What would be a better way to start your day? Because how are you going to be a leader like that?
That's right.
You're already redlining.
Yeah.
Right? And that question sat with me, right? Like, I work with leaders. I'm going to work with a leader tomorrow afternoon talking about stress management with a specific CEO, good guy. But it resonated with me. How do I start my day? And during COVID, I had a little bit more time. I was home, and I had an out office. I still do. I have an out adjacent to my house. It's very cool. I love it. But I would go out there, and somebody turned me on to this book by Ryan Holiday that he wrote with another gentleman. It's a co-authored book, and it's called The Daily Stoic. A single quotation from one of the great Stoics from anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, most prominently Marcus Aurelius. But Socrates and Epictetus and some of these other great thinkers, most of which I just knew as marble statues. But now I'm reading a single paragraph, and then interpretation that you could use in a single page. It takes you less than 5 minutes to sit and center on that. And then on good days, I might have a word with my higher power. I will often now read Marcus Aurelius' great book himself. He wrote a book called Meditations that is mind-blowing. how contemporary it is. And he wrote it for himself. He didn't write it for consumption.
It was his journal.
It was his journal.
Yeah.
To hold himself in check, to keep himself to be a good emperor that he was of Rome.
Yeah.
But it helps me. It's like, because we know the world can get crazy. I know I can get crazy in the world. Sometimes I cause the crazy. But this book, these books, and these ancient wisdom of human beings who went through the same things that we went through and are drawing on the same principles or the violations of them. And it helped me. And now I make that recommendation to others. And in this book, Leadership 2 Words at a Time, I have a chapter now dedicated to cultivating composure. Because I think if you start the day with positive intentionality, another person that comes to mind, Ben Franklin, one of my favorite of all time, right? He wrote an autobiography that is definitely worth reading.
Okay.
And he says in that book that he starts his day, puts his feet on the ground, and the first question he asks himself is, what good shall I do in the world today? Now, any leader can ask that question, however that question forms itself for them in their own words. But what am I going to do with my leadership today that's positive?
Yeah.
And then ends the day with a bookending question, what good in the world have I done today? And I reflect back on the day. If you did nothing else, and you started your day with that, you'd be better than the guy who's starting off with the angry, restless, irritable face coming into work, who's uptight and a short fuse ready to blow off steam on everybody.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's, I would say, for me, continuing to read The Daily Stoic, continuing to read more of those books that have the ancient wisdom allows us to know these ancient characters were actually ancient people.
Right.
With a lot of the same struggles, hopes, dreams, desires that we have, and a lot of the same obstacles that we have, mostly internal.
Right.
Mostly internal. And for me, having that fresh idea, because the energy for me isn't in what I've learned, it's what I'm learning. It's not in how I've grown, it's how I'm growing, right? And for you to continue to tap into that perspective of not only do I need clarity for me, but I need to be able to grab onto clarity, grab onto perspectives that these people who have the front row seat to their businesses cannot see. Right. And so I imagine it has to be even all that more important that you're focused and not distracted, and you've got that headset on.
Yeah, particularly with executive coaching, because you've got to, the gift that you can offer that person is your full presence. I have to be attentive. I have to listen deeply. I don't do them by Zoom. I don't do them by Google Hangouts. I do them the old-fashioned way, by phone. Right? I with headphones on, and I might be looking at the window, but I'm listening deeply to the human being in front of me, to the struggles that they're having, so I can attend to them. I think that listening without judgment, which I have to constantly peel out of my soul, right? This judgment, or out of my head, right? Like, it's the thing that gets in the way most between human beings, I think.
It's the Stoic principle, being able to notice or listen without judgment, because it gets in our head, this person has a problem. I need to fix a problem. I'm good at fixing problems. And then we make ourselves into a lifeguard rather than a life coach, right? We get in the life-saving business rather than the life coaching business. We get into these spots where we make ourselves necessary and them small, which is the exact outcome that we don't want, right? Where our job is to be able to equip and empower others, and that to me is like this idea of harmony with nature, right? That because that's the whole Stoic principle. Is like, if we learn to live our life in seasons, if we understand that things happen, things come and they go, right? To be able to notice without judgment. But as these modern tools come here, you just said, I still use the phone. I think we have these tools where Zoom, it's easier to be present than it is on the phone. But what I can use that for is I've got the tools that make people feel the same presence on the phone on Zoom, because I withdraw a little bit more. I use the technology instead of enhancing what I do to replace what I do. What is your take on that technology now, and how can leaders best use it? Yeah. Technology.
Yeah, so I think that a person has to go where their comfort place is for technology, right? I will have some, like this conversation tomorrow that I'm having with the CEO. He's about 18 years younger than me. He's a young CEO of a $650 million company. I'm pretty well sure he's going to want to do it through Google Hangouts. I think he needs to see the facial and the intonation and such, and that works, for him. Because he's CEO, I will treat him special and allow that. It's where he's more comfortable to be himself and be able to show up as himself. So I think a person has to sort of decide what is there. And I have some coaches a cadre of coaches for one of my clients. We have 3 other coaches. One of them's here in Asheville, and I leave it up to them. What is their technological preference for doing it? I just find that I would even rather do it by phone than in person. I occasionally will do.
Interesting.
I will occasionally do a session in person, sometimes over dinner or a meal or something, and that's healthy to occasionally do. But there's something about listening that I'm able to listen through the lens of my ears, and it forces a deeper listening because I have to listen for the intonation.
Great point.
So for me, it works, right? But technology is a wild thing. It can be an asset, and we have to figure out how to work with it and allow it to work for us instead of being slaves to it.
As far as for me, I'm in this place as a leader where there are parts of me that are afraid, right? As I look into how is my industry going to be shaped by artificial intelligence? How is it going to be reshaped? Where are people going to become irrelevant? Because they will be. They will become irrelevant. Where are the next opportunities for people to become more relevant or to create an opportunity that doesn't even exist yet, create positions that don't even exist? Because it's not just the one side of the issue. It doesn't just take jobs. It also opens new ones up, just as robotics has done in assembly line work forever.
Sure.
Right? But I have this feeling like I'm half afraid of it, but then half of I don't want to miss the boat.
Yeah.
What in times like this, what do leaders need to know? What do they need to do? What's courage? I should ask a better question. What's courageous now?
Well, some level of discomfort, and I think that most of us have some of that. I think that we're enamored with it and maybe even excited by it with some fear attached. I mean, I saw an article today that had the head of Chat GPT, I think the early inventors of AI, and the article was about we have to be really careful to not destroy ourselves with this is a technology that's super, super potent. And how I first experienced it, Brian, I was at a conference of leadership professionals, and they put up a big screen, and somebody just typed into ChatGPT, design an 8-module leadership course. And I'm like, oh, that's going to be interesting. This probably take a long time. Instantly, an 8-module leadership course. And on the one hand, I was like, dang, that's going to help me. And then I was like, dang, that's going to replace me. You can have excitement and fear at the same time.
Absolutely.
I think one thing is proportionality and perspective that you might remember. I remember years ago, there was discussion on TV how they were going to start building new cities around this new technology that was coming out. They were going to rearrange cities. That was the person that was talking about this innovation that was getting ready to come out. And the newscasters all knew what it was, but they weren't allowed to reveal what it was yet. And so we're like, this, when it gets revealed, it's going to change the world. It was the Segway. Now when you see a Segway, I mean, it's a neat invention, right? It's great for touring a city to be able to, go on a Segway tour.
And to know who the people who are visiting your city are. You can identify them immediately.
And no dissing of the Segway. It's a great technology. But I think that some of us some people are too quick to get too on the bandwagon and all frothy, and they're going to give their life to this thing. And other people are sitting on the sidelines, at the dance, not going to ask the person to go on the date. And I think that we have to find our middle place, and we have to find the right place for us. But I don't think we can afford to sit on the sidelines on this, because the adoption has been, in 2 months it was adopted at 200 million people. That's more than any other technology in the history of the world. And you've got to pay attention to this technology, and it can help you. And I've already used it, right? I've already used it to help me gather tips for certain topics and such, and then be able to edit. So it now requires me to be an editor because it will hallucinate.
Yeah.
I did my own biography, and it said these really flattering things, most of which I had written about myself in other forms of time. Skimmed the surface, and here's this stuff about Bill Treasure. But it also said that I was a Navy SEAL. I assure you and your listeners, I'm not a Navy SEAL. But I wrote a book with one, and so it hallucinated that was part of my biography. So it will get things wrong. So we have to be good editors of it, and we have to learn to ask better questions and write and accurate questions. How will we use this technology? In just like all leadership, are we going to use it for good? Because leadership can be used for great things, or it can be used for genocide.
Yeah.
Right? So we, as leaders, are we going to do right by others, do right by the world, leave people and the organization better off than we found it? And now with the addition of AI, will we lead that technology to do those things? Or are we going to use it for our defense departments to beat up the other guys and to decimate some country? And, but what are we going to use it for? That's up to us. Do we have good souls?
And I think that brings me to the final word of this portion. One of the things that I recognized about you, and I'm excited to partner with you in this and learn more about this, is that with one of your books, or maybe multiple of them, all the proceeds go to charities that benefit people. Both I believe it was global foundations, or maybe they were more local. But I was struck years ago by the importance of generosity, and I love that you, as a creator, as a coach, as an author, are putting this out there in the world. I think that radical generosity has an unshakable link to, or it has a supernatural link to unshakable fulfillment. And when we get the generosity piece right, we get the mindset piece right. Can you talk to leaders? Can you talk to me? Talk to anybody who's willing to listen about the importance of generosity in everything from your creative process to the businesses that you get.
Well, let me clarify too, because I have to strive to be more generous, right? Like, it's one of my books, and it's the book Leaders Open Doors, and I gave all the proceeds and continue to give all the proceeds away from that book to programs to support children with special needs. I have a daughter who has special needs, and she benefits in no way from those proceeds, but to places like United Cerebral Palsy, March of Dimes, places like that. But I need to do better on that front. The other thing that I will occasionally do, although I'm afraid to tell your listeners, is that I will occasionally do pro bono coaching work for people who are involved in good causes or themselves are not able to afford me and are in a transitional state. They may have just lost their job. I've been working with them. I'm not going to cut them loose, right? So I find my ways to do to give back, but I want to do and need to do more. It's an area that is a gap for me that I feel like I need to close more. But I think that, doing well and doing good, there needs to be. You as a leader, as you grow, you've got the privilege to be able to impact people and their lives for the better, and there needs to be an exchange for that. If you have been enhanced, like I'm so thankful, I've benefited from the thousands of people that I've been able to work with. I'm a better human being. And Brian, actually, I think that's why I do this work. That's the recognition in the last year and a half that I've had, is that I love that I might be able to be helpful. I love that somebody might pick up something and they carry it forward, or some tip that I give. And that's great. I hope that that's true. But I do this work because in reminding people of their own conscience, in reminding them to be self-respectful, in reminding them to have personal fidelity, in reminding them to do right by others, which they know, but just sometimes have to be reminded. But in reminding them, I'm reminded. And then I become a better human being in this world. So there's a lot of selfishness involved in this work, but it's enlightened self-interest, maybe.
Yeah, well, call it what you want. I'll call that an aspiration, right? And so for me, I find the same thing, is that I do the work that I most need in the world. That and I love that term, having fidelity with yourself, having that trust, having a sincere desire to do right, and understanding that. And I see that you've carried that fidelity your coaching and into the work that you're doing. And I'm encouraged by it. I'm challenged by it because now I'm like, this guy has written so many books. I haven't written a single one. I need to get on it. And
you got it in you, man.
I love the fact that you're so open and willing to share just incredibly valuable content for people like myself, people like all of us who listen to discussions like this, so that we can become better. So I want to thank you for your time, and really thank you for your insight and input and everything that I know, all the work that I know has gone into preparing for this moment for you.
So. Yeah, thank you for having me on. And I like who you are. Yeah. I like who you're becoming, and I like what you're going to make happen.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. Yeah. Thanks again for joining us for this conversation. Head right over to our Patreon for exclusive content, including more from our conversation today. Thank you all for joining our conversations. We're developing this platform for simple, profound tools and techniques that can help you get the best out of your life and, more importantly, unlock potential. You can find me across all social platforms at The Brian Delaney, and online, come visit us at thebriandelaney.com.